She never thought a simple family gathering could turn into the most humiliating day of her life. But that's exactly what happened when Maya, a kind and soft-spoken woman, accompanied her younger sister to meet her in-laws for the first time. It was supposed to be a joyful occasion, a celebration of love and new beginnings. But instead, it became a cruel display of arrogance and pride, leaving Maya feeling small and unwanted in a room full of strangers who barely tried to hide their contempt. From the moment she walked in, Maya felt the shift in the air. Her plain clothes, humble nature, and quiet presence were judged before she even spoke. The sisters' in-laws, dressed in designer outfits and dripping with attitude, exchanged smirks and whispered comments behind her back. They made sharp remarks about standards, class, and even questioned why someone like Maya was brought along in the first place. Her sister, caught in between, stayed silent, afraid to speak up, afraid to ruin her own chances at acceptance. What they didn't know, what none of them even bothered to ask, was that Maya wasn't just a simple woman living a quiet life. She was married, and her husband, he wasn't just any man. He was a billionaire, a self-made businessman known for his sharp mind and generous heart, who adored Maya more than anything in the world. But Maya never flaunted her life. She never spoke of luxury or power, because for her, love and respect mattered more than labels and money. As the afternoon dragged on, the mockery grew bolder. Maya sat in silence, holding back tears, swallowing the hurt, while those around her laughed and compared handbags and vacations. But what they didn't realize was that this humiliation would not go unnoticed. Because somewhere not far away, Maya's husband had learned what was happening. And he wasn't the type to stay silent when someone he loved was being disrespected. What happened next stunned everyone in that room. The tables turned in a way no one could have imagined. And by the time it was over, the same people who looked down on Maya were left speechless. But what did he do? And how did a single act flip the power so dramatically? You're about to find out. Stay tuned for the next part of the story. Maya had always been the quiet one in the family. She didn't crave attention, never posted luxury vacations online, and preferred homemade meals over fancy restaurants. Her younger sister Neha was the opposite, bold, stylish, and eager to fit into high society. So when Neha got engaged to Rohan, a man from a wealthy and influential family, Maya supported her without hesitation. She attended every function, helped with the preparations, and stood by her sister like she always had. But Maya never expected that support to be repaid with cold glances and whispered insults. Neha's in-laws had built their lives around status. Everything about them screamed wealth and superiority, from the way they dressed to the way they looked down on anyone they thought didn't belong. To them, Maya was just a background character, someone too plain, too quiet, too simple. They didn't ask what she did. They didn't care where she came from. One of the women even nudged another and said, "She looks like she took the wrong turn on the way to the servants' entrance." Maya heard it. She heard it all. But instead of reacting, she stayed composed. There was strength in her silence, but also pain. What hurt more than their words was her sister's reaction, or rather, the lack of one. Neha smiled nervously and said nothing. She didn't want to cause a scene. She didn't want to lose the approval of her new family. So she stayed quiet, letting Maya sit there like a shadow. What none of them knew was that Maya's husband, Arjun, had been receiving texts all afternoon. One of the catering staff at the event, someone who had once worked at Arjun's company, recognized Maya and secretly informed him of the situation. The messages described how Maya was being humiliated, laughed at, and made to feel like an outsider. Arjun wasn't a man who threw his weight around, but he was fiercely protective. He had built an empire from scratch, and while he could command attention in boardrooms and billion-dollar meetings, the only thing that truly mattered to him was Maya's happiness. When he read the final message, he stood up from his office chair, placed his phone down, and calmly said to his assistant, "Cancel the rest of my meetings. I'm going to pick up my wife." What happened when he walked through those doors would change everything, but not just for Maya. As Arjun's car pulled up outside the grand estate where the gathering was being held, his face was calm, but his mind was racing. He wasn't angry, in the loud, shouting kind of way. He was the kind of angry that ran cold, controlled, sharp, and ready to hit exactly where it would be felt the most. He stepped out, dressed in his usual understated style. No flashy watches, no entourage. Just a quiet confidence that turned heads without trying. He wasn't here to make a scene. He was here to remind a few people who they were really dealing with. Inside the house, Maya was still seated on the corner sofa, quietly sipping a glass of water, pretending not to notice the constant looks being thrown her way. The conversations around her had shifted from mockery to gossip, some about expensive wedding venues, others about who had been seen shopping where. But the mood shifted the moment Arjun entered the room. At first, no one recognized him. He didn't match the image they had of someone powerful. But when one of the family friends whispered his name under her breath, the entire room went still. A billionaire husband. The name Arjun Malhotra wasn't unknown. It was just unexpected. People stood up. Phones came out. Eyes widened. The same in-laws who had spent the last hour belittling Maya were now awkwardly fixing their hair and adjusting their jewelry. Neha's mother-in-law, Mrs. Kapoor, smiled nervously and stood up to greet him, trying to cover her surprise with forced politeness. "Oh, we didn't know Maya's husband would be joining us. Such a pleasant surprise." Arjun didn't respond to her right away. His eyes were on Maya, who looked startled but also quietly relieved. He walked straight to her, placed a hand gently on her shoulder and said, "I heard you weren't being treated well." That sentence, soft but direct, sent chills through the room. He wasn't yelling. He didn't need to. Everyone felt the weight of his words. Meanwhile, Neha watched from the side, her face stiff. She was torn, happy her sister had someone to stand up for her, but also anxious about what this meant for her own standing in the Kapoor family. Rohan, her fiancé, looked at his parents, clearly unsure how to react. There was a shift in the air now. Something was about to happen. But no one could predict just how deep the cracks would run. Arjun's presence changed the entire room. The laughter died. The whispers stopped. Everyone who had judged Maya just moments ago now watched in silence, unsure of what was coming next. But Arjun didn't rush. He sat beside Maya, still holding her hand, and turned toward Mrs. Kapoor with a polite but firm expression. "I've heard some interesting things today," he said slowly. "Things I didn't expect to hear in a house that's supposed to welcome family." Mrs. Kapoor forced a laugh. "Oh, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We were only having fun. You know how these gatherings can be." Arjun tilted his head. "Is mocking someone's background considered fun here?" His voice was still calm, but every word landed like a stone. No one dared speak. Even Rohan, who had once stood confidently beside his parents, now shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Neha, whose face had gone pale. Neha tried to step in, her voice shaky. "Arjun, I think you're overreacting a little. It was just tension, new family dynamics, that's all." Maya finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. "Neha, they made it very clear how they see me. And you let them." It wasn't anger in her voice. It was hurt. And somehow, that stung more than shouting ever could. The silence deepened. Everyone could feel the weight of Maya's words. In that moment, it wasn't just about money or class. It was about dignity, about respect, about how easily people forget kindness when blinded by status. Meanwhile, Arjun glanced around the room. His eyes landed on the expensive art, the lavish decor, the faces that once carried smugness now clouded by worry. Then he leaned back slightly and said, Maya never needed to explain who she was. But maybe I should, just once, so we're all clear. A hush fell. Every phone stopped recording. Every breath was held. You see her as simple, Arjun continued, looking straight at Mrs. Kapoor. But she's the reason I built everything I have. Her belief in me, when I had nothing, is why this empire exists. So when you insult her, you insult the very foundation of what I've built. The words hit hard. Faces dropped. And just when everyone thought he was done, Arjun stood up. But he wasn't finished yet. What he was about to do next would leave the entire room in complete shock. As Arjun stood up, the room froze. Everyone expected a dramatic speech or maybe a walkout. But what happened next was nothing anyone could have predicted. He pulled out his phone and made a quiet call. Bring the files inside, he said simply. Within seconds, his assistant entered the house, carrying a sleek leather folder. Arjun took it, opened it carefully, and then laid it flat on the glass table in front of everyone. What is this? Mrs. Kapoor asked, her voice trembling slightly, though she tried to keep her tone casual. Arjun looked directly at Rohan, then at Neha. This, he said, tapping the folder, is a business proposal, a joint venture between my company and Kapoor Holdings, something Rohan's father had been pushing hard for these past 6 months. Neha's eyes widened. Wait, what? Yes, Arjun nodded. I've been quietly evaluating the partnership. We were almost ready to move forward. But then today happened. Now the room was in full panic. Rohan's father, who had been quietly observing from the far corner, suddenly stepped forward. Arjun, let's not mix personal emotions with business decisions. These kinds of things are common in family gatherings. Arjun's smile was faint, almost polite. You're right, but here's where it becomes more than just personal. The way your family treated my wife says everything I need to know about how you handle relationships, respect, and trust. If this is how you treat people you think are below you, how will you treat business partners when the balance shifts? The tension skyrocketed. Maya sat still, stunned. She had no idea Arjun had been negotiating with the same family that had spent the afternoon tearing her down. The insult they threw at her wasn't just personal. It now threatened something much bigger. Neha's voice cracked as she finally spoke. Arjun, please, don't do this. It's not just about them. It affects my future, too. He looked at her calmly. You had the chance to speak up, Neha. Not once did you say a word in your sister's defense. Silence can be just as loud as cruelty. The stakes had shifted completely. What began as a personal humiliation was now spiraling into a potential collapse of a major business deal, and possibly the engagement itself. The entire room held its breath, waiting to see what Arjun would do next. But the final decision still hadn't been made. The silence in the room was so heavy, it felt like no one dared to breathe. Every eye was on Arjun as he stood tall, the folder still resting on the table like a loaded weapon. The Kapoors, once confident and proud, now looked rattled, caught between protecting their image and saving the deal that meant everything to their business. Mrs. Kapoor finally broke the silence. Please, Mr. Malhotra, there's no need to take this further. We admit we may have misjudged Maya. It was wrong, truly. Her voice was shaky, and for the first time all afternoon, it sounded genuine, though maybe it was fear speaking louder than honesty. Arjun looked over at Maya. Her eyes were locked on him, filled with emotion, grateful but unsure. She hadn't asked for this. All she ever wanted was a little kindness, but now she was the center of a storm. With the entire room watching, Arjun reached for the folder, slowly closed it, and said, "The deal is off. Gasps rippled through the room. But not because of today, he continued. Because this partnership was never built on mutual respect. And without that, there's no real foundation, business or otherwise. Mr. Kapoor tried to interject, but Arjun raised a hand calmly. Don't worry. This decision doesn't come from spite. It's a matter of principle. Then he turned to Rohan. You still have a chance to make things right, with Maya, with your future wife, but it's up to you whether you choose courage or convenience. Rohan looked down, ashamed. And Neha. She broke. Tears welled in her eyes as she stepped toward Maya. I was wrong, she whispered. I wanted so badly to be accepted by them that I forgot who's always been there for me. I'm sorry, Maya. I should have stood up. For the first time that day, Maya spoke. With strength. I forgave you the moment it happened, but I hope you remember how it felt, not to be poor, but to be made to feel small. Neha nodded, tears falling freely now. Just when it seemed everything was coming to a close, Arjun's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and raised an eyebrow. Then he turned to Maya. You remember that charity school you've been dreaming of building in your hometown? He said softly. I think we just found the perfect land. And guess who it used to belong to? The room stared. Kapoor's old estate, bought anonymously. As of this morning, it's yours. Maya blinked in shock. This was more than payback. It was justice, with grace. The room fell silent once more, but this time it wasn't out of discomfort. It was pure disbelief. Maya stood there, completely still, processing Arjun's words. The same family who had mocked her just hours ago now unknowingly helped her take the next step toward something she had only dreamed of. A school for children in her village, a place where kids like her could be given the opportunities she never had. And now, the land was hers. She looked at Arjun, her eyes full of emotion. He didn't say anything more. He didn't need to. His actions had already spoken louder than any words ever could. He had taken her pain and turned it into something meaningful. Not just revenge, but purpose. The Kapoors, who had once stood so tall in their pride, were now humbled. Mrs. Kapoor sat down quietly, her face pale and still. Mr. Kapoor gave a small nod, accepting defeat with a hint of respect in his eyes. Even Rohan looked changed, his posture no longer stiff with ego but softened by guilt and reflection. He walked over to Neha and whispered something to her, and she nodded silently. Neha took one last step toward Maya. If you'll still come to my wedding, I want you there as my sister, not someone I let stand alone. Maya gave a small smile. Only if you remember that respect isn't earned by impressing others. It's shown in how we treat those who can do nothing for us. The tension finally melted, replaced by something quiet and healing. As Arjun guided Maya out of the room, hand in hand, the silence behind them was no longer cold. It was reflective. The people who once judged her now watched her leave not with scorn, but with admiration. In the car, as the engine started, Maya looked at her husband. You didn't have to do all that. I know, he replied, eyes on the road ahead. But you deserved it. And just like that, the simple woman who was once humiliated left behind a room full of people who would never forget her. Not because of wealth, not because of power, but because she taught them something their money never could: grace, strength, and quiet dignity. And somewhere far from the noise of society parties and shallow judgments, a patch of land waited to be transformed into something beautiful, just like the woman who now owned it.